World War I was a war dominated by military technology and innovations. For the first time, the war was not won by brilliant strategists and tacticians, but instead by brilliant engineers and inventors.
Before World War I, armies with good military tacticians had huge advantages on the battlefield. The French soldiers, led by Napoleon Bonaparte, was one example of a successful army with a smart general. He utilized his army to their maximum capacity by making them rush towards the enemy as fast as they could. Another instance of archaic strategy is the British Redcoats, who would march together, shoulder by shoulder, in red suits, making no attempt to camouflage. The bright uniform's only purpose was to allow British soldiers to be distinguishable from other soldiers. Line infantry was often used in wars during the 17th and 18th centuries. Many soldiers would stand side by side in a line when shooting to increase how much area was covered with gunfire. These strategies had been successful in the past.
World War I changed everything. The inventions of new technologies left military strategy in the dust, leading to more bloody battles than ever before. The old tactics of fast movements were shot down by machine guns, blown up by grenades, run over by tanks, and sunk by submarines. It soon became a race to create the best technology to fight the enemies.
An example of emerging technology was the submarine. Also known as U-boats, they were a German invention introduced to the Great War in 1914. The main weapon used by submarines was underwater torpedoes. It was utilized to sink unexpected ships.
Once hand bombs or grenades were supplied to the soldiers in war, things got a little bit crazy. Now soldiers could pull a pin and recede to throw this explosive projectile at their enemies. Some grenades would explode on impact, which meant that if you were hit by one, you didn't have any time for last words. But other grenades exploded via time fuses, so you may or may not have had some time for those last wishes. With some countries lagging behind, homemade grenades were made. These grenades also used pins, but were liable to explode before you were ready to detonate. Great Britain. But eventually the British got themselves together and created one of the most deadly bombs used in World War I, the Frag Grenade. This bomb spewed bits of metal upon detonation to make sure they could kill more soldiers nearby. Germany was not going to let Great Britain have one of the deadliest bombs, so they came up with the disc bomb and the gas bomb. The gas bomb would propel poisonous gas when it exploded, and the disc bomb had one of the shortest fuses, lasting a maximum of 2 seconds, giving enemies no time to reach shelter.
With the introduction of these new destructive weapons, previous military strategies became obsolete. Attempts to use the old strategies led to many pointless deaths. New strategies were needed to allow soldiers and technology to be more effective on the battlefield, as well as keep more soldiers safe and alive. Most above-ground tactics could not be used due to continuous bombardment.
This led to the first and most obvious innovation in military strategy, slowing the war down and settling into a defensive position underneath the surface, trench warfare. Trench warfare was so prominent that by the end of the war, both sides had dug at least 12,000 miles of trenches. In between these trenches lies no man's land, which was constantly stormed with explosions. This led to a stalemate, leaving soldiers with no choice but to stay in the trenches.
Armies also found ways to move underground. Instead of traveling on the surface, they dug tunnels underground to reach their opponents. Once they were under the enemy, they would place mines beneath them. Armies also found ways to detect tunnels beneath them. They would put a stick into the ground and put the above-ground end between their teeth to try to feel vibrations. They also listened to oil drums filled with water that were placed on the floor, trying to hear tunnelers making noise. The mines that were used were extremely powerful. One blast from multiple mines was able to kill about 10,000 soldiers. This strategy was effective at killing soldiers, but took a long time. Some of the tunnels took almost a year to dig.
World War I was lit in more ways than one. The integration of the Flamethrower, a device that spit super hot fire in World War I, changed the game completely. As trench warfare strategy grew more and more popular, the Germans came up with a wily plan to obliterate their enemies. They decided to make their way to the enemy trench and surprise them by incinerating them in their trenches. This attack took thousands of lives. Although the flamethrower was successful in close combat and taking out big groups, it had its drawbacks. The cylinder that held the fuel for the flamethrower was unstable and could explode at any time, killing the user and any unlucky soldiers nearby. Due to the fact that the user of the flamethrower was being shot at, this explosion was bound to happen.
The British took a different approach. Instead of going over the top with a mass army and hoping for a mere dozen of them to get across, they sent armored vehicles. The first tanks were deployed at the Battle of Flores Courcelette, where although not many tanks actually made it all the way across the no man's land, the 9 that did helped gauge how good the original batch was, which was improved to have devastating results.
World War I was the transition phase between old and new warfare. Due to a great demand in better weaponry, tanks, flamethrowers, bombs, and submarines were all invented. With this technology surging ahead and strategy lagging behind, battles were really bloody until new strategies, such as trench warfare and tunneling, evolved.